So welcome to another episode of Accounting for Old Cars, and today you join me in Bess, my Mark II 1971 Triumph Vitesse. Something a little bit different today. We'll actually be driving to Ipswich this afternoon, where I hope to join a group of fellow enthusiasts from the East Anglian Practical Classics Car Club. We're taking our cars to a retirement home in Ipswich with the view of putting them on display for some of the residents as a kind of living memory experience. Now, this is something which is commonly done in other parts of the world, especially Australia. I know there are a number of car clubs that make a point of taking their cars to residential homes. It's a relatively new thing for us in this part of the world, and it's one that I have a particular interest in because of my own recent academic background and some of the work that I do, both in terms of paid work and my voluntary work. What I plan to do is to film our journey into Ipswich and to be able to have a chat with you while we're driving about what it is that motivated me to start using my cars in this way, and also to develop this YouTube channel. Unfortunately, we won't be able to film the event itself for reasons of preserving the residents' anonymity, but I hope to be able to get some photographs of the cars and the gathering, as it were, and to be able to share those with you in a little while. So you'll join me shortly as we're on the road to Ipswich, and I can tell you a little bit more about my own motivation for doing this sort of work. So I think we picked a really great day to come and make our visit to the residential home in Ipswich, and I'm looking forward to meeting up with the other members of the EAPC, and it'll be interesting to see what the residents themselves make of the cars. It is a little bit warm this afternoon by English standards. We're in the high 20s, and I am slightly concerned that the sun is going to make the vinyl seats in this car very uncomfortable. So I brought a blanket or two in the boot, which when I get to the home I'll probably have to spread those out so that the seats are more comfortable to sit on. I said earlier that I would try to explain why I want to use these cars in this way, and there are two aspects to it. One is the history of this particular car that we're in, which is Bess, my 1971 Mark II Vitesse, and then the other aspect of this is the sort of work and studying that I've been doing over the last 7 years. And these two things seem to have come together in an unexpected way and created what I hope is an opportunity for me and some of my friends to do something really constructive and to make a difference to the quality of life for some of the elderly people in our community and also their families as well. So, by way of a self-declaration, about 7 years ago I began to study a part-time degree in psychology, and I completed that degree about a year ago. But during the course of my studies, I looked at everything from child psychology to typical mental health problems, things like addiction, memory loss through brain injury or trauma, and of course we looked at dementia. And my guess is that everybody who watches this will have been at some point in their life touched by dementia, whether it's someone who's close to them, a parent or a spouse, or whether it's someone that they have worked with or that they know within their community. And essentially there are two prevalent forms of dementia that we tend to come across in older people. One of them being Alzheimer's, which is perhaps the best known type of dementia. And Alzheimer's is a degenerative process in which the person gradually loses functional memory. So they lose their ability to store information in their short-term memory. They can lose parts of their semantic memory. So by that I mean facts and figures and words. Their ability to recognize people, so even those closest to them, their own children or wives, husbands, girlfriends, etc., that begins to diminish. And this is hugely distressing, obviously, to loved ones, because when that recognition goes, sadly, it tends to be lost forever. However, the long-term memory, and especially autobiographical memory, seems to survive much longer than working memory. And I should just say working memory is something like where you're having to hold a shopping list in your head, and then as you go around the shops you're deleting the items from your memory in a sense as you pick them up off the aisle. So you're having to hold a certain amount of information at any given time in order to do something like a calculation. So that, together with short-term memory, goes, which is why you may find someone with dementia will ask you the same question several times, because they have forgotten that either they asked the question or you answered the question 5 minutes ago. But the long-term autobiographical memory remains, and what tends to happen is it sort of diminishes in a way that the more recent memories go first, and the last memories to be left are memories often associated with early life, so childhood, adolescence, that sort of thing. And with that are what I would describe as emotional memories. And this is to do with associations of smell, of sound, and especially of touch. And it's one of the reasons that people with dementia can respond so well to somebody who has a kind voice, who might hold their hand, because it takes them back to those moments of early childhood. And you often find that as the disease advances, people will sort of lose a sense of themselves, and they may regress almost to a childlike state, where at night time they will actually ask for their mother or father, or they get confused about where their bedroom is or where they're going to bed, because when you say it's time for bed, what they're looking for is their childhood bedroom, not the bedroom in their home or in their residential home setting. And what it means is that the least distressing way sometimes of managing someone with those sort of memory deficits is to try to enter their world. So arguing with them and saying, well, no, this is your bedroom, is not helpful. All you're doing is sort of creating a heightened level of anxiety and distress. So if you can't bring that person into your world, sometimes it's kinder to try to enter theirs and to kind of reassure them almost by recreating that sense of childhood. Now that doesn't mean you can rebuild their bedroom as it was in childhood, but familiar things are important, and reassuring sort of maternal or paternal gestures like holding their hand, stroking their hair, using a quiet, soothing voice, provide immense comfort and reduce stress and anxiety. Now, Alzheimer's is a sort of gradual decline, and it tends to be a case of over a period of months or even years, gradually the person loses some of their everyday functions, their cognitive function and understanding. Vascular dementia is associated with a lack of oxygen getting to the brain cells, and there's sort of a kind of brain death or brain cell death as a result of oxygenated blood not reaching those parts of the brain. And what tends to happen is that the loss of function is quite sudden. So if we think of Alzheimer's as a gradual decline, vascular dementia can be stepped. So one day a person can fulfill a task and the next day they can't, and the loss of that function is perhaps gone forever. And sometimes it's not obvious which kind of dementia a person has until some time into the cognitive decline. However, the effects are pretty much the same, which is this loss of memory, this loss of their sense of self, inability to recognize other people, heightened anxiety, and often depression. And when I was studying this topic, I was thinking about this idea of early autobiographical memories lasting longer, and thinking that perhaps there might be a way to stimulate or to encourage sufferers of dementia to revisit those memories from their adolescence or their early childhood or early adulthood. And what's important is that childhood and adolescence and the sort of early 20s are often associated with big life events. Going to school, for example, something which would tend to stay in the memory. Being a teenager, going out to a first concert, falling in love for the first time, getting a job, and then as you go into the 20s, starting a family. buying a house, renting a property for the first time, becoming independent. And when we look at the age groups now of people being diagnosed with dementia, we're talking about people who grew up in the 1950s and 60s, sadly, and in some cases much later than that, 1970s, and with the rare cases of early onset dementia, it could be people who've grown up during the 1980s. Now, the thing about classic cars is, unlike houses, they don't really change. You know, people don't extend classic cars, they don't sort of modernize them and do the sort of things that happen in houses where kitchens get ripped out, bathrooms get ripped out, rooms get knocked through, and houses sort of lose all their period features. As you can see looking at the dashboard here, the dashboard on Bess is pretty much the same today in 2023 as it was in 1971. We've got a couple of extra gauges, but apart from that, anyone who knew this car in 1971 would immediately recognize it now. They would probably recognize the way the car smells, how it sounds, and what it feels like to sit in the car. And so the purpose of using classic cars as a memory experience is really to allow people suffering from dementia to access the cars through touch, smell, sight and sound. And hopefully, in some cases, this may trigger some of these early memories of, for example, I was driven to school in one of these, or I drove my children to school, or my first car, or my first boyfriend or girlfriend had one of these, whatever it might be. And using those stimuluses to start conversations is a very useful way of bringing that person out of themselves and taking part in a social activity which the rest of us take for granted, which is one of a normal conversation. Now, there is a program which has been used in the treatment and support of dementia sufferers called SPECL, and you can Google this. So it's SPECAL, so SPECL, not special, although it is pretty special. And the point of SPECL is that it uses things like family photographs and albums and maybe pieces of artwork or everyday objects that are familiar to create stories for dementia sufferers. And these are stories that children and grandchildren can create together with the dementia sufferer. And the stories don't have to be accurate, but the story's about creating an essence of part of their life and allowing that person and encouraging them to talk about experiences. And in the process, what may happen is that untold stories may come to the fore. It may somehow alleviate their distress or anxiety, and perhaps, in the best cases, make them feel that they belong again, that they have something to contribute. And this is really what we're planning to do today. Whether it's going to work in quite the way I hope, I don't know. The temperature's rising, and it may simply be that the residents at this home are not able to actually come out and engage with the cars because it's just simply too hot for them. In which case it'll be a little bit disappointing for us, but nonetheless we'll be able to give them a view of the cars through the window, and we might learn something in the process. Having said that, any disappointment that we feel is really not important. This is not about us, this is about the people that we're going to see. It's also worth noting that not everyone who engages with these cars today will have dementia. There may be some people who are simply living in a residential home because of immobility and the need for sort of close support from carers, in which case the conversations that we have may be more nostalgic and in a sense maybe much more free-flowing. But what I'm hoping is in those cases that actually what we have done is simply brighten someone's day and you know, created an afternoon filled with interest for them. And clearly if there are carers or relatives who are at the event and are able to take photographs, then this experience can be shared, you know, days or weeks later, again as a memory prompt and as a conversation opener. So that's really what I've got planned for this afternoon. But I did say earlier that I would explain why I set up a YouTube channel, and to be frank, this was initially as a way of sharing my own drives with a relative of mine who is particularly dear to me. And he's someone that has always enjoyed driving. He no longer lives in Suffolk, but did live in Suffolk for many years. And it is just not possible for him to join me in the car and to come and enjoy these journeys. And so the idea was for me to make these short films and be able to send them to him so that he could watch them on his computer at home. And I knew that they gave him a huge amount of pleasure, and it also meant that when we spoke on the telephone or when I went to go and see him, we had plenty to talk about. And it didn't take much of a leap of imagination to move from doing that on a sort of one-to-one basis to just opening it up to YouTube to see whether there were other people who might be interested. And what I found, of course, is there are quite a lot of car enthusiasts like me who enjoy watching these videos, at least some of them. There are a number of fans of Triumphs, particularly of Herald's Vitesses, who really like engaging with my videos. And then there are other people who perhaps have an association with Suffolk, who might be housebound, who would like to know more about the county, and then we've got people abroad who are interested to see what this part of England is like. You know, they don't have a conception of country lanes or English villages or market towns, and so it works on that level. So my YouTube channel really has sort of been born out of a desire on my part just to connect with someone that I care for deeply, and it's expanded. I get a huge amount of pleasure out of doing these films. Truth is, I go for drives anyway, so all I need to do is rig up a camera and you guys just come along with me, which is great. But long term, I can also see the potential for fine-tuning some of these videos, making them a little bit shorter, but maybe more detailed, and presenting them in a way not just with my car, but maybe with other people's cars, and typically those cars that were sort of most popular in the day, like Morris Minors, Austin Cambridges, the various Fords, Zephyrs, Cortinas, Escort, Anglias, that sort of thing, and be able to offer those films to families and sufferers of Alzheimer's, or indeed people who, cognitively are in good health but may simply be housebound, as a way really of making conversations, stimulating memories and reconnecting. And so that's the aim of today's exercise, and really my aim for the channel. If incidentally you have any sort of thoughts on this subject, or if you know someone who lives in Suffolk that might enjoy a personal visit from me or my friends with this car, or my other Vitesse, or indeed any other car, perhaps contact me. Just let me know in the comments, and I'd be delighted to see if there's anything I can do to help, and to see whether this idea that I have actually has any real legs, and whether there is a future in doing this sort of thing. I'd really like to hear from you and see what you think. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to carry on this journey into Ipswich, and then I'll have a catch up with you once I've finished with the residents and I'm free to film again, and then I can sort of tell you a little bit about how this went, whether we were able to achieve any of the goals at all today, or if not, what we learned from the experience. So you'll see me very shortly. So welcome back. I've just literally finished our meeting at the residential home in Ipswich, and it was a great afternoon. There were, 5 cars attended from the club, which was as many as we could fit in the car park, and lovely small group of residents who came out and braved the hot weather to have a look at the cars. And it was an interesting exercise from my point of view. There were certainly 1 or 2 residents who were completely engaged with the cars, and these were people who had strong memories of their own earlier lives driving, maintaining their own cars, including a very nice young lady who cast a critical eye over my engine bay and pointed out that one of the flexible hoses from the heater matrix is cracked and needs to be replaced. And she did make me smile, actually, because she told me off in the nicest possible way for not maintaining a cleaner engine bay, which I have to say is true as far as Bess is concerned. I haven't yet sort of got down into properly detailing this car, partly because she's relatively new to me, and simply I haven't had the time to really do this because I spent too much time enjoying myself driving her. But there were other residents who were not able to fully engage with the cars per se, but clearly got a lot out of just being outside and the sense of community and being a part of something. And frankly, I found the whole thing really touching and extremely worthwhile, so much so that I have promised that I will be a part of another visit, which I hope we can do sooner rather than later, because I think, as I've said before in other videos, I feel a kind of obligation to share my good fortune and to share these cars that frankly we're merely custodians of with other people. But the memories that these cars triggered during the afternoon. And not necessarily memories of these specific cars, but we had one gentleman who was talking about his history with Vauxhall Vivas, and recounting a trip that he'd made before he had to stop driving down to the Ace Cafe in London. And again, one of the women that was a resident at the care home talking about her experience of maintaining her own cars and engines. And I think it was something that held a lot of meaning for the residents, but all my friends at the club really got something out of it as well. And I think for us it was rewarding on a level which is very different to the sort of reward you get from showing your car at a car show. It was also quite fun because I was able to also talk to some of the carers and staff, and one or two of them got the chance to sit in Bess and to have a look at the controls, which were frankly so alien to them because they were all young. They were, men and women in their sort of 20s. So that was rather fun as well. Just take this rather sharp corner which crept up on me. No, I think it was certainly a humbling experience, and what it taught me was the importance of belonging, that sense of community that most of us take for granted until we lose it, until we lose our independence. And as an aging population, that may be something that faces a lot of us in the future, and it's something I certainly think about with the work that I do in community care when I see people who have been discharged from hospital and are having to readjust their lives and having perhaps to become dependent on support workers and people within primary health care for the first time, and the sort of deep psychological impact that has. So yeah, it was nice to bring a bit of joy to them. But I think the most poignant part of the afternoon was talking to a member of staff about the impact that COVID had on the residents at the care home and also on the staff, and the fact that, as we know, care homes were sort of used as a receptacle for people from hospital in order to sort of clear wards and make beds available to patients coming in with the virus. And not only did it have a devastating effect by bringing COVID into care homes, which just spread like wildfire, but the lasting psychological effects on staff and other patients, and the fact that there are people working in the care industry now who are still suffering from PTSD. Not all of them have been able to access counselling. As it happens, the care home that I went to today had taken it upon themselves to organise counselling for their staff following the pandemic. But PTSD is not something that can be overcome instantly, and whilst the rest of us, and sadly some of the people in government, have kind of packed it up and put it away, the legacy of COVID is still very much there with some of the staff working in both community care and in care homes, and of course the NHS. And I think for me, when I began working in community care a little while ago, I was reminded of a line from the excellent HBO series Band of Brothers, where at the end of a series, the real Major Richard Winters was interviewed, and he recalled being asked by his grandson whether he was a hero. So I think Dick Winters actually said, my grandson said to me, "Grandpa, were you a hero in the war?" And Winters' reply to his grandson, which I thought was both touching and significant, was, "No, I was not a hero, but I had the honor to serve with heroes." And for my part, that is how I feel every day that I go to work with my colleagues who work through the pandemic and continue to give everything in terms of empathy and compassion and dedication. I am certainly no hero, but I have the honor to work with heroes, and today I saw some of that at the care home we visited, and for what it's worth, I would love to just pay tribute to everyone who works in care or for the NHS. It's truly humbling, and I'm honoured to have been able just to share a bit of my afternoon today with some of the wonderful residents. Anyway, I hope this video was interesting. I haven't given you a commentary on the drive, but as you can see, we've enjoyed quite a bit of the Suffolk countryside on this drive to and from Ipswich, and I really look forward to seeing you again in my next video. I will just mention I've got a couple of really exciting car shows coming up. There's one in August at Stratford St Andrew, which I'm on the organising committee with, and you'll see I've posted a video already on YouTube. But I've also got a fabulous midweek event coming up at Friston, which is near Aldborough, and that promises to be a great event with a lot of pre-war cars. So my hope is to get along with the camera and give you a tour of that event, which I'm sure you'll absolutely love. So if I don't see you before then, I will certainly see you following the Friston event with a new video. Anyway, it's been wonderful to share this event with you this afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you soon. So take care.